One of the things that I found fascinating about Simone is their life experience has been just kind of amazing from being born in Azerbaijan in 84 when there was this conflict, and then becoming a refugee at a very young age, living in Russia, and then moving at 11 to the Bronx, getting a green card, being able to come to America. So culture shock at a young, very developmentally important age. And then as they talk about wanting to be a doctor and then becoming disillusioned with that, and then trying this, and I don't know exactly at what point they realized they were on the spectrum, but that adds just a whole nother layer to all of the trauma and difficulty and experiences that make up who they are today. But
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
fascinating.
The the piece that really, stuck out to me was, I mean, they are so raw, right, with their emotions, and I'm excited for everyone to hear their rawness.
And
Um,
authenticity and willingness to be open
yeah,
about really tough subjects.
right. And they talk about this parenting thing and the level of rage, postpartum, the guilt, the shame, right?
Mm.
Like they were really having a difficult time, and in fact, mentioning that they had really never talked about this before.
Yeah.
So I think that was really beautiful.
And having the willingness now to have that discussion with their kids, that's warrior parent stuff for sure.
Yeah.
You're going to be open, you're going to be vulnerable, you're going to not beat yourself up, but admit, I was doing the best I can or could at that time. Here's what I was going through, and I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
apologize for the ways that I that I didn't do things just right,
Yeah.
and I'm learning and growing.
The world is a lot right now. Are you feeling it? We all need new tools to help us walk through the chaos with grace, ease, and compassion for each other and for ourselves. In this podcast, you'll hear from parents, educators, and other experts who can bring perspective to the monumental job of parenting. It's time to level up and be warriors for our kids and our communities. This is the Warrior Parent Podcast. I'm Marci Mitchell.
And I'm Debbie DiManno. As parents, we understand that it really does take a village to raise our kids. We hope that this podcast serves to create and support that community for you. Join us as we discuss and practice our core tools, which are proven mind-body techniques that can be used by anyone to improve your life on a daily basis.
Hey, Warrior Parents, just a trigger warning for today's episode. We're going to talk about some difficult topics, including postpartum depression and issues around the LGBTQIA plus community and the neurodivergent community. So I think it's a great conversation, but do take care of yourself. All right, welcome back to the Warrior Parent Podcast. We are, as always, so happy to have you joining us. And today we are speaking with Dr. Simone Kolysh, who is a sociologist and a life coach at Defiant Life Coaching. They hold degrees in biology, public health, and sociology, and wrote Everyday Violence, the Public Harassment of Women and LGBTQ People. They teach women's studies part-time and coach neurodivergent, LGBTQ, and marginalized people the rest of the time. So welcome, Simone. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate being on.
Oh my goodness. So Simone, or do you prefer I call you Dr. Kolysh or Simone?
The one is fine.
Either one is
Okay.
fine. Well, we do want to give you your accolades for all your hard work in becoming a doctor. So
Yes.
so thank you for all your hard work. So I spent a fair amount of time doing a little recon, and I find your story incredibly powerful and fascinating and courageous, honestly. And so I know you came from Russia, right? You were born in Russia. Is that true?
I was born in Azerbaijan and was a refugee kid to Russia.
Okay, refugee kid to
Oh,
Russia. Oh my
boy.
goodness. Okay. All right. So like I said, like I don't even know where to begin with you, but why don't you go ahead and give a background as to your story, how you came to America, how you became a doctor and on and on and on. And then we'll get into some more questions about parenting and all that.
In 1984, I was born in Azerbaijan, which was at the time part of the Soviet Union. And as that was falling apart, there's an ethnic conflict there that's ongoing between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And I was Armenian and Russian in Azerbaijan. So we were targeted and had to leave. One day, my parents picked me up, and I never saw home again. And they were able to get on some ships to go to the southern tip of Russia, and that's where we lived for a few years. And during those years, they applied for a green card, and we won the green card lottery to come to the United States. I was about 11 at the time, and we moved into our sponsor's house in Brooklyn, New York. And it was pretty tough for me. My brother died shortly after. That was really traumatic. And I kind of kept busy to avoid life and wanted to be a physician. So I went into pre-med at NYU. I did a lot of research, more of the biological kind of research, and as I learned about US society, it really appalled me that there's so much inequality. So I did not end up going to medical school. I wanted to learn about public health. And so I got a master's in public health and learned even more just how arbitrary people's illness and survival rates are. I worked for the American Cancer Society after the fact and saw firsthand the difference between being able to afford even transportation to the hospital or being able
Yes.
to afford cancer meds, and how that determines whether you live or die. And so I burnt out pretty quickly. I was really angry a lot of the time, seeing people, just have their lives destroyed by American healthcare and inaccessibility of it. And so I decided to get a PhD, and I laugh because I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. Um, for the reason that I went into it, which was to figure out what's wrong with society. And I now know that that was a very autistic way of going about it. And a lot of us end up in higher ed and in med school, law school, just trying to be like, what's wrong with everyone? And I
Yes.
I I went, and it took a while. I was, in New York. I was teaching at the same time as I was, doing my work. I had a baby in the middle of that PhD program. I learned a lot is wrong with, higher ed as well as college institutions. I was a professor. I still am, but a lot wrong with mothers trying to make it in higher ed. I used to meet with people secretly at Starbucks who kind of whispered to me, "We heard you were a mom. How's that? And what did you do?" And I just felt that it was a very backwards, sort of archaic place, even though it was sociology and you'd think we'd be pretty progressive. And I would meet with people over lots of taboo subjects, but I didn't think that motherhood was one, or to such an
Wow.
extent. So I helped folks figure out that there is no work-life balance, and we didn't even have maternity leave at the time that I had my child during the PhD program. And so 2 weeks later, after delivering a nearly 11-pound baby, I was back to work in a
Oh,
women's studies department, ironically. And so I finished my PhD out of spite, I think. And that part,
bravo. Bravo.
thank you. That part I do recommend people now when they ask if they should finish. I think that, we put in so much work and time and money
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
blood, sweat, and tears that if you can, you can. If not, I'll celebrate you quitting, whatever.
Yes.
But the book you mentioned, I wrote it in the middle of my fourth baby. I delivered my fourth baby and then wrote the book all at the same time. The pandemic hit at the same time.
Wow.
I got a job. I moved out here with my family, my wife and I, and our 4 kids and a dog,
So
and
where's out here? Where do you live now?
Maryland. So I
Oh, you
used to
live
be
in
in
America?
New York, and now I'm in Maryland.
Okay.
And it was just a really tough move for me. I left my mom and aunt behind and my support system to work at a college here, and that went terribly over the course of the pandemic and for lots of other
Yeah.
reasons we can get into, but it doesn't matter. I got fired and I picked myself back up and launched the life coaching business. And
Mm-hmm.
it turns out there are a lot of people whose lives are not making sense the way they thought it would.
Yeah.
So I certainly have quite a lot of clients trying to figure out everything from motherhood to their marriages to their sexuality to their
Yeah.
disability to, it appears that all my background makes sense now, and in
Yeah.
retrospect was not a waste at all.
Oh my
No.
gosh. So, so Marci, you can see as she's speaking, I'm thinking, okay, I want to pick that topic and talk about like
Yeah.
medicine, like how messed up that is, the university system, how much that is, like every single thing you just spoke
Yeah.
to could be a
The
topic for,
injustice of healthcare, the injustice of all of it. Yeah.
yeah,
And
like,
and then also just being a refugee kid, boy, that's seeing what's happening across the world. That's such a early childhood trauma kind of experience. Yeah, there's a lot there.
yeah, my goodness. So yeah, so the thing that I really pick up on, and Marcy and I talk about this a lot when we're working with, younger generations, is about this finding your purpose. We just had a conversation with someone about your soul's purpose, and you have had quite a journey, and it brought you to this place, right? Come full circle to become a life coach, right? For all the reasons that Marcy and I just spoke of, right? So talk about your clients and who you might be life coaching, who resonates with you and the type of coaching that you're doing.
It's interesting because I look back to why I hired a life coach, and it is an explanation. I had everything fall apart and all the rugs were pulled out from under me, and I kind of had a spiritual awakening. And I mean, I was always into witchcraft and magic, but this one was major. And as I kind of perfected my intuition and listening to signs from the universe, I came across a TikTok by a life coach, and I hired her pretty immediately. She works out of Canada, and she pushed at all the very painful spots
Mhm.
and
Mm.
and helped me along, I think, at the start of the spiritual awakening. And then we parted ways, and then I think a year after that, once I self-diagnosed my autism, I looked for an autistic life coach specifically, and that was such a huge alignment. It shifted
Mm.
everything for me, and I knew that
Wow.
if I were going to be inspired by her work and go down that path, that I would prioritize neurodivergent people and autistic people specifically, because I never spoke to anyone autistic as a professional that was out and autistic. There are many people who are autistic but are not, openly so. And
Mm.
so that's how I started formulating my group of people. And then because I'm LGBTQ and I'm a gender and sexuality scholar, I figured to take, those folks under my wing too. And they also overlap with autism and neurodivergence. So anyone who's, queer or transgender or non-binary. And then because I am a sociologist, I figured to talk to anyone who's marginalized in other ways. So people of color, disabled folks, immigrant folks. I have lived experience and education to cover those vulnerable groups. And yet, I want to say that I'm willing to speak with anyone that feels aligned, because sometimes I want to talk to people like myself, and then I want to talk to people unlike myself. And I think I can help across the board. So I try to stay flexible. And when I consult with folks, do like a free quick 30-minute consult, I try to not be biased myself and just kind of say, okay, like here's what I can do, and if that feels like it resonates, let's work together. And
Mm.
so I've then had all sorts. I mean, I know most
Wow.
of my clients are neurodivergent and end up being LGBTQ, but the reasons that I thought people would come for me ended up not necessarily being the reasons that they come for me. So I try to just say, if it works, like if it feels like it resonates, then let's do it. Like I
Yeah.
never thought I'd have many therapists as clients because I
Mm.
speak against the psychiatric industrial complex quite a bit, or against the DSM quite a bit. And there's always this discussion about therapy versus life coaching, which is not needed, as they are distinct. And somehow, despite all my critiques, I ended up having lots of therapists as clients precisely because I wasn't a therapist, and because there's
Yes.
no conflict of interest, and because they are also unable to be fully themselves in their career, and they are so burnt out. So this was unexpected, and I am now trying to just expand my mind, the podcasts I do, and stay open to everyone, because it's obviously a journey for me too. A learning journey.
Well, I think so for myself, I have done years and years, and people hear me talk about the 30 years with a therapist, right? And then it was, finally like, okay, at some point you need to go out and actually do the work. You stop talking about it and go actually live all of this work. But what's interesting for me, and so I'm twice your age, at least, maybe 3 times, but
how old do you think I am?
I don't know, 25.
I'm 40.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Okay. Well, I still could be your mother. But back in the day, there was no such thing as a life coach, right? And so what we did was we sat in our shit, so to speak, and we just talked about this, ruminating about the crap over and over and over and over and over again. And it wasn't until later in life when I realized, like, okay, I'm done with the crap and now I need to move forward, right? And I think, that's a lot of what you speak to. I imagine there's, you talk about there's this confrontation between therapists and life coach. If you ask me, they could all be working together.
I agree. And I tell my clients that we should have a team of people helping us, and that therapists can help you through a specific condition that you may or may not be diagnosed with. And then life coaches, we kind of take a much broader perspective, and there's lots of other connected parts that therapists may not be talking about. But to your point about stop talking and start doing, that's exactly why people come to me for concrete steps. But it's interesting that people think if they have concrete steps and they just do them, that their life will change, but without actually acknowledging trauma and their neurodivergence and lots of other things they're avoiding, they are not able to simply take the steps. And if they could, they would have. So it ends up sort of circling back to having to confront our demons before we can take steps, or before that becomes easier.
We keep saying that the only way out of it is through it, and
that's
so
right. I say
you
that
got to
daily.
do the work.
It's like labor.
Lord.
All right. There's only one option. Baby's coming out.
I find it fascinating that what you speak to about the relationship between neurodivergence and LGBTQ. So so talk a little bit more about that. I've never heard that correlation before.
Yep. So so even if we don't know the reason behind it, and I will venture a guess, folks who are autistic tend to be LGBTQ, and there's a large amount of LGBTQ people who are neurodivergent, and also in the group that I work with, millennials and Gen Xers who are both undiagnosed or late in life diagnosed, and late in life trying to figure out their gender and sexuality. It feels a lot like the same process. But one guess I'll venture as a sociologist is that the rules of the game don't make sense to a lot of us autistic and neurodivergent people, because they were not created with us in mind. And so when there are certain rules that don't make sense, whether it's the rules of gender or sexuality or the rules of communication, then we simply move some other way. So I'm an agender person, not because I had some kind of complicated relationship with gender, but because gender as a binary is a false binary. And so once I learned that pretty young, and then through my experience and education, I was just like, oh, this doesn't have anything to do with me. And so it wasn't so much as a huge wrestling part, but it was just like, this is nonsensical, similar to how I kind of got rid of religion early on, or like organized religion, or started questioning science and medicine. Just whenever things are not as easy and they are much messier than people think, then I just go with the mess instead of the binary. And so a lot of, I think, neurodivergent people, it just doesn't make sense. So they know the truth of things is really very convoluted and like kind of contradictory and hypocritical. And so
Mm.
because they're kind of marginalized anyway as being like a different kid or a loner or whatever. I mean, it's easier to some extent to then also kind of question all the other things too, because you're
Yeah.
questioning why you're ostracized or why your parents aren't listening to you or whatever. And so you question
Yeah.
all these kind of gender and sexual constructs too. So that might be one reason why there's overlap. But other people want to talk about how it's, biology, and you could find a gay brain and a trans brain, and I can talk for hours about the problem there too.
That's
That's so
another
interesting. So
podcast. Yes.
what you're
Yeah.
kind of what I think I heard you saying is that because you knew that certain rigid paradigms that society places were bullshit, then you were able to kind of just be more open to what you knew was real for you. And then when we are more open, because this whole idea of the gender binary and other things about the way we live our lives, because that's what society told us, you release a lot of that, opens you up to being just more open to showing up on the planet the way that is right for you. And now I'm going beyond, but to me it feels like, okay, and sometimes it might be this and sometimes it might be that, and it's more fluid, it's more it's less like, here's the rule, you're breaking the rule, we just let that go. So I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's really about,
Marcy and I are all about breaking down the walls. Like break down the walls,
Yeah.
take down the rules, tear down the constructs. Like
Right.
let's just get a fresh start. And everybody, just gets to be who they are or who they came to be. Like who made up all these silly rules about society anyway, right? It was just part of
Patriarchy.
yeah, part of controlling the situation, right? And
Yeah.
I think we're with you, and we're at this place where it's time for some really big changes, right?
It's also interesting because I do have a transgender neurodivergent son. And I've always noticed that a lot of his friends do seem to fall into both of those categories. So I hadn't ever really, I mean, I've thought about it. Oh, that's interesting, but I hadn't really heard more of a thought through description. So I find that really interesting and helpful.
yeah, and people who are neurodivergent, we talk about this all the time. We, the neurodivergent people,
Yeah.
they find each other like magnets, even if they're not
Yes.
di
Yes. So
so
true.
there's some way that we kind of cling as a molecule to other molecules
Yes.
like that. And
Well,
I
it's
think
it's
I love
energy.
that. Yeah, I love that. That
Yeah.
even if you don't know yet, you are somehow proximal to others like you. So I think
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's great to have your people. We all need that. We all need that place where we feel accepted and not judged, and we can just show up exactly as ourselves. That's so powerful, and it's different for everyone. So it's like, it's, to me, this community is miles ahead of the rest of the world, because you're doing it well, and so many people are still trying to fit themselves into boxes or put on the armor, and that's not what it's about. That's painful. That's really painful to do that, to try to be something you're not, or hide the things you think are shameful that are just actually your colors and your beauty and who
Mhm.
you are.
So I want to change course a little bit now that we know exactly who you are. We know that you're also a mother of four.
Yeah.
So talk about your navigating not only your identity, but motherhood with that. Let's talk about that.
Motherhood is very painful
Uh,
of a topic for me and for many of my clients and for many mothers. And I just freaked out because someone was saying it's Mother's Day yesterday, but it was in the UK. So
oh,
Oops.
like, whoops.
it's on May 12th. So May 12th for US listeners.
Yes.
But I never realized how much it would be a lens through which I view my life in the world. I think when I was younger and feeling like I had to have it all, I had my first child for all the wrong reasons, and I think I may
Mm.
have had them all for all the wrong reasons, but but they were different reasons each time. So when I was getting married, I think at 21, and pushed into that marriage by my immigrant family and really just kind of pressure in general, I was like, well, I have to have a child because that's what you do next. And so I did, and I struggled for like a year, and it was like a really huge sense of failure for me that and I was a college student. I was a senior in college, pregnant with my first, and
Mm.
that was pretty impossible too. And so I don't know what it was that I was trying to achieve, but I know that there is this notion of having it all that many people feel, especially before they can shed all the stuff we just talked about that needs shedding.
Mm-hmm.
So I had him. I had severe postpartum depression, which I now think was just autistic meltdown and shutdown.
Mm.
Uh, because I think there wasn't really any kind of psychological or behavioral reasons, but the labor was tough and long, and I think the sleeplessness of it, the
Yeah.
breastfeeding, and just the general
Mm-hmm.
shift of life from 0 kids to 1 was really tough for me, and I nearly died. And I was saved by, psychiatry and by fast acting anti-anxiety medications. But the 3 months before I got to that point, I think I lived like 4 centuries in that state of
Mm.
a never-ending panic. And so I started doing research on mothers. Then it was always a side interest of learning about how no one tells people anything about how it really is, and how no one really treats postpartum depression or even identifies people at risk, and how no one honestly talks about how rage-inducing things might feel. And the by the time I had my second child, I have also experienced a miscarriage. So I started to
Mm.
go through these lived experiences that mothers go through of devastation and grief and loss. And my
Mm.
second was born on my birthday, and it's a gift.
Mm.
We're 25 years apart, and was a rainbow baby, which is what you call the baby after the miscarriage. And
Mm. Ah.
I there was a recession, and I had to kind of leave him and go work. That's when I worked for the American Cancer Society. And I think my being full of rage all the time impacted my kids negatively, and they were able to tell me some of that when they are teens quite recently. And so a lot of my memories and talking to you about it now, it's probably my first time talking about it with a
Mm.
ton of guilt and regret, and emotion.
We talk about this a lot. In fact, just last week we were talking about motherhood, and Marci and I also, like, we're all just doing the best we could, right, with what
In
we
that
had
moment.
at the time.
Yes.
We had old paradigms for raising our kids. We talked about, like, spanking, and there's like all these different things, that
Yeah.
all the genres of parenting, and we just didn't know. We didn't know. We're all doing the best we could. And so the idea now is to just have those conversations, being able to have those conversations with your kids, and owning your stuff, and not be like, yeah, like, get over it, it was a rough time, whatever. But no,
Yeah.
like, look, like, this was a really hard time for me. And there's no, again, I don't mean to bring this up to make you feel worse, because we all carry it around. No matter what we do, we
Yeah.
were not perfect parents. And that's why we have the parent podcast, because there is no perfect parenting, right? We're here to have these difficult discussions about a
Yeah.
very difficult thing, which is being a parent. I feel like that's the biggest job you'll
Yeah.
ever have in your life, right? So
Yeah, no, and I being spiritually awakened now, moved through this with accountability and responsibility and tough conversations, and I help other
Yes.
mothers do the same now. And that's why I think I went through what I went through to get to this point, because there's so many people
yes.
who need to hear me say they are
Yes.
not monsters and they deserve
Yeah.
to move forward. And so I get why the universe played it that way, but I think it's very frustrating for me because I had a tough upbringing and a tough relationship with my parents, lots of trauma of a different kind. And I think I worked really hard to avoid putting that kind of trauma onto my kids. There's lots of other trauma that I didn't know I was doing. And
Yeah.
so it does feel kind of impossible, and hindsight being 2020. So then I was in grad school and had my third because I had a dream that he was coming, and told my husband at the time, like, oh, this child, I'm its vessel. So I'm the vessel for this child. So the child's coming regardless. We should start trying because I'll be pregnant in like 2 months. And I was right. And
Mm.
child was the right child. And when he turned 2, he looked like the child in my dream that I was holding. I was like,
Wow.
oh, look at you. Here you are. You
Wow.
showed up. And then I fully came into my lesbianism, and my husband and I split, and it was difficult, to go through now a second divorce and
Mm.
parenting 3 kids. And I swear, I think this Earth School assignment of mine, I just put in as many courses or
Yeah.
assignments as I could. I don't know why. And it just felt like now, if you speak to someone who does human design and they look at my profile, they're like, oh yeah, it makes sense. You're a 4/6 in human design. The first 40 years of your life is just like trying to get all this human experience under your belt,
Yeah.
and lots of failure and lots of trial and error stuff
Mhm.
Yes.
that's really painful. And then the next 40 years of your life, you kind of teach people how to go through that
Yes.
for where they are. And so I get it. It just was not fun. And
No.
so then my wife and I got together, and we've had to deal with co-parenting, and her
Yes.
wanting a child, and our losing her child, her pregnancy at 24 weeks, and
Mm.
grieving the loss of that child, and then realizing that I always, carried pregnancies well. And so we did reciprocal in vitro fertilization, her egg, donor sperm, my uterus, and brought that baby into this world. And the day after he was born, New York shut down. And I did not get
Oh,
the opportunity to finally have like an experience that I deserved. And I this time planned for
yes.
psychiatrists and therapists and chiropractors and massage people, and to get me through the postpartum period. And it was honestly
Oh,
worse in a different way because I thought our lives were over, and then people started,
yes.
and in our families too, and I had to send a couple of my kids to their father because he was in a more remote location than New York City, and
Oh, right.
it's
Oh,
just been a mess. And and it's only now that here in Maryland we're trying to look back on the mess and be like, God, what was all of that? And the kids, many of them are much older now, and the younger kids are getting a different version of me, and there's
yeah.
just all of these things to balance at the same time.
That is a
That-
lot. That is a lot.
yeah, that talk about evolvement, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, the fact that you're willing to be here and have this very intimate, vulnerable conversation says so many things about you. And I'm hoping that you'll share this with your children, right? To understand, like, what their mother has come through to bring them into this world. I mean, it is a very complicated situation that we've all just come through. My daughter her trauma was she was born, you know, after 9/11, and then she graduated during COVID. So she didn't even have a graduation. So this is her little paradigm of life, right? But to show your children your resiliency and bravery is I think what it's all about. I think that's the ticket to being a parent. If you're gonna ask me, right? Can you give us some tidbits about parenting, some things that you talk about with your clients and advice, and maybe some simple steps well, there's no simple steps. I'll take that back. Some
Um,
steps to parenting.
I think a lot of moms are neurodivergent and don't know it. And I think a lot of our anger is not a choice. And what's complicated is that we are overwhelmed by parenthood, but didn't know that we didn't have to become mothers. And many people that I work with were made to, or didn't know there was any other way. And I think it's very difficult to talk about what we do now that we do know. And this is true of everything. What we do know about our trauma, what we know about our spiritual awakening, what we know about neurodivergence, what we know about society after after collective trauma, like, what do we do now
Yeah.
that we have children and we have more insight into who we are and what we need? And you can't just start over. You do actually have to interact with the folks in your life, and the kids in your life, and just your family. And I would suggest to mothers out there to think about how all those things they joke about, joke about being a lesbian, joke about, being chronically tired, or their constant pain, or joke about, how they drink themselves to sleep, to take themselves seriously when they have those considerations, that it's not a joke at all, that it's very possible they are disabled, chronically ill, neurodivergent, that they are a lesbian, that they are burnt out, that they are using substances to numb the overwhelm of everyday life. So to just prioritize themselves so that they can show up better for the children that they feel guilty about in the first place. The people that come to me, say they're monsters, but they're not. And yet they harmed their children or continue to harm themselves. And we do have to, as someone with a background in like harm reduction, we do actually have to meet people where they're at without judgment, and help them move forward in a better way, while recognizing that they didn't know, as you said, better at the time. And so this whole like didn't know any better thing keeps coming up for a lot of us. And then I wonder about, what our children won't know any better about as they become parents. And I think about that all the time. My oldest, who's almost 18, has this great love and great girlfriend, and they talk about my grandchildren all the time, and I just have to laugh. And I say, not right now, because I haven't even figured out the motherhood part of and now you're gonna give me babies, and I'm just not ready. And I just feel like my entire life I haven't been ready. And my other child, who's my second oldest, has been pretty blunt, about being like, well, obviously, you weren't ready. Why did you have so many? They just ask really ruthless questions. They
Well,
don't know.
what I see, and I'm no therapist, but I am a mom and I've been around a while, but really what I see is a healing of your generation. So Marci and I have been, I have a lot of trauma, a lot of generational healing. There's a ton of work that I have had to do in my own life, but we talk about, we just had someone on a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about generational healing, and if in fact we can do this work, this really hard trauma work, you can, they suggest that you can heal 7 generations before you and 7 generations after. And that's the part that gets me excited. As difficult and as as painful as this is, that's the piece that gives me hope. And that's why we have these conversations, right? Because this is going on not just for you and for me and for, this is going on for millions of people. And so let's create an awakening around all of these difficult things so that we can start making a difference.
Yeah, thank you for doing this work.
Yeah. Thank you for being open. So, Marci, how, and you wrote a book. I think there's a whole bunch of things we didn't even get to talk about, but I feel like we're running out of time. Marci, can you talk about that a little bit, or how can we?
So we're gonna have links on our page to your to defiantlifecoaching.com, and we have your Instagram link too. Is there anything else? You tell us again the name of your book and how people can get a hold of that.
So you can just Google it. It's in all the bookstores. It's called Everyday Violence, the Public Harassment of Women and LGBTQ People. And it's based on 10 years of my research in New York City on catcalling, on being harassed in other ways, and how that connects, gender and sexuality to race, class, and space. And it's written accessibly People love it because it gives an explanation for what they experience in public and at work and, at school. And folks are angry all the time at their children being harassed in similar ways, and they want to know like what's going on and what to tell their teenage daughters, for example. And there aren't really great answers to this, but at least it lays out the negative impact of harassment and
Yeah.
talks about how
Well, and just an acknowledgement that it exists, right?
Yes,
Right. Let's be clear.
that it is so persistent and pervasive that it changes people's lives forever.
And then they can work on with you your coaching, right?
Yes.
So
So
they just
anyone
go,
and everyone can get a free consult and work with me as a life coach. And you could book both sessions and consults on defiantlifecoaching.com.
Excellent.
awesome. Thank you, Simone, so much. Thank you for being so vulnerable with our audience.
You shared so much really good information. It's really important.
I appreciate you both.
Yeah, thank you. And now for a moment about meditation and how it can help you and your family to self-regulate and mindfully return to a place of calm and centeredness. Our Cour Tools platform consists of a number of proven tools and techniques that are designed to reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm in spite of what's going on in your world. Meditation is just one of these powerful tools. And through a special partnership with Donna Appadoni, we have created a group of meditations available only on our platform and via Donna's own website. Here's Donna.
Sky, thy name is peace. Whether bright or gray, at night or in the light of day, you teach me there is no limit. Hi, I'm Donna Appadoni, and I'm the person who writes and produces the meditations that are used by Cour Experience. Everything in our lives has an element of peace. This meditation reminds us to take a minute to look and listen for peace that's all around us. Look at how pretty the sky is. Look at how peaceful it feels. Look at the beautiful lake or river that you drive past or live near. Look at how peaceful it is. See how many things you can find right around you that are peaceful. Doesn't matter if you're in a country setting or if you're in a very urban and very busy and loud setting. Peace is still there when you look for it, when you find it. Remember, whatever's going on with you right now, you can do anything you set your mind to do. Circle of life, thy name is peace. Babies are born, loved ones die. From dust to dust, you teach me to celebrate each moment.
Donna's book, called Drive Time Meditations, is a collection of 183 of her purpose-driven motivators. Drive Time Meditations is available on Amazon.
Thank you for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast. You can find us at courexperience.org. Make sure you join us next week for another informative conversation to help you and your family show up mindfully, purposefully, and joyfully with each other and in your community.
Our meditation segment is produced by Donna Appadoni with music from Scott Holmes. The full collection of meditations is in Donna's book, Drive Time Meditations, available on Amazon and at donnaappadoni.com. Thanks to Samuel Hale, LLC, for sponsoring this podcast. Technical and marketing support comes from Inspire Your Brand. Our podcast editor is Justin Beeden. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, producers, or financial supporters. I'm Debbie DiManno.
And I'm Marci Mitchell. The Warrior Parent Podcast is a production of Cour Experience. If you resonate with the idea of creating a community to help support kids and families, won't you join us by following the podcast and sharing this episode? You can even write a review. It truly does take a village, and we appreciate you. Thank you for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast, produced by Cour Experience. That's our nonprofit, and I would like to tell you about something big that's coming up for us. May 2nd, 2024 is the big day of giving in the greater Sacramento area. This is a day for nonprofits to fundraise and really strive to meet their annual goals. And for the first time, Cour Experience will be participating in this big event. I want to tell you a little bit about our nonprofit, Cour Experience, and our Cour Tools app, which brings non-clinical modalities that are scientifically proven to decrease stress and anxiety to your home. They are appropriate for kids, for teens, for young adults, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, anyone who wants to lower their stress and anxiety. And our tools include heart-brain coherence, EFT tapping, meditation, yoga, bilateral tapping, art expression, nutrition, hydration, sleep protocols, and journaling. And there are more on the app. You can find out more at courexperience.org. On the big day of giving, if you would like to support our vision of a calmer, more centered world with less anxiety, depression, and suicidality, please give to Cour Experience on the big day of giving, May 2nd, or any day. You can go to our show notes or our website for a link and more information on how to give. We really believe in a world that has less anxiety, less stress, less suicidality, where people can show up as their authentic selves, in joy and purpose, and living their vision. We appreciate your help in getting us there. Thank you from Cour Experience and the Warrior Parent Podcast.
Hey, Warrior Parents, it's Marci and Debbie. And if you're listening to this today, May 2nd, the day that this episode came out, I just want to remind you that this is big day of giving in the Sacramento area, and it is our big fundraiser for the year. And you can give wherever you are. You don't have to be in the Sacramento area, but it's our opportunity to really try to raise funds for our nonprofit, which is Cour Experience, Cour spelled C-O-U-R, French word for heart. And so that's our nonprofit. That's where we're trying to do this good work with mental health for kids and families and all the people on the planet. So I'm going to ask you if you're willing to go to courexperience.org today, and you can give to Cour Experience for the big day of giving. Though it should come up right away. You can click on it. It'll take you through whatever you can give. We appreciate so much. Today, the first 5,000 will be matched at 100%. So that's an opportunity for us to bring in an extra 5,000 in addition to what we're bringing. And Big Day of Giving is all day long, May 2nd, Thursday, May 2nd, from 12:01 in the morning to 11:59 at night. And whatever you can give, we just appreciate you.
Yes. And we are going to be on site at Dave's Hot Chicken in Folsom at 2379 Iron Point Road in Folsom, California. Marci and I will be out there jumping up and down for 8 hours with our signs.
And eating chicken.
And eating lots of
Delicious
hot chicken. Yes. And so a portion, 20% of all the proceeds for everyone going to Dave's Hot Chicken on that day from 11 until 8 o'clock. We will be there. So we are double dipping on May 2nd.
Yes.
So hopefully
Big day.
we'll come out or you'll come out and see us there.
Yes, come out, eat chicken, donate to Cour Experience. Have a fantastic day. And thanks for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast.